Welcome to the PDCA plan for training in business process modeling notation at ThermoServ. Today we'll take a look at an Excel spreadsheet that will help us list out our processes so we can get them ready for mapping. The first step in reviewing the Excel spreadsheet is to take a look at the instructions. The Instruction tab highlights the gold section, the blue section, and the red section of the spreadsheet, and the workbook tabs are color-coded for convenience. The first step is to discuss just the basic list of processes. There's the basic list of processes that are operating your process owner group. You can use the organizational chart for your team to help guide you through the steps. For example, I've placed the red team's organizational structure in the Excel spreadsheet for convenience. There are 5 major processes in the red team's organizational structure: skilled trades, tooling, molding, assembling, and printing. Clearly, while looking over the organizational structure, it should be more convenient to identify the processes in your organizational group. We'll start the PDCA process by opening the gold tab, which is the template for the process list. The gold template is very simple and basically describes the process name and a simple description of the process, and gives an option for the user to determine whether or not it's a top process that you're working on. We'll fill in a few process names based on the organizational chart for the red team. Once again, from the org chart there are maintenance and repair, tooling, molding, assembling, and printing processes in the red team organizational structure. Each process can be described simply to help us later as a reference for building the BPMn value stream map. Some descriptions for these processes can include the items highlighted in the video. Note the descriptions are very simple, usually 5 words or less. The idea is to support the process name with a general description that everyone can understand and agree to. Once we've identified a few processes, we can determine whether or not they are major processes. You can see in our example we chose all the processes are top processes for the red team. Going back to the Instructions tab, since we've done some work in the gold tab, let's take a look and see what's next. Notice the instructions show us there are some advanced features of the gold tab, but we can come back to those later. The next step in the PDCA process is to focus on the blue tab. Basic operations for the blue tab include taking a look at the gold tab to determine which processes are top processes, and then write the priority of the top process once we've pasted the information from the gold tab to the blue tab. Once in the blue tab, we can determine the priority of the process by just simply giving them a rank. Once we've ranked the processes, they're usually sorted by their priority. This list is subjective and not necessarily important, but it helps us focus on the top processes, and it's useful to add that information now, even though we may change it later. Now let's identify the top processes listed out in the gold tab and add it to the blue tab, so we'll take a look at some of the inputs and outputs for each process and some other features of the process as it relates to their modeling. If we freeze the first column, we can see that there are inputs and outputs for each major process. Each process having a series of inputs and outputs, they should also have a measure of effectiveness or be tied to a key performance indicator. For today, it's more important just to get the list of processes down and agreed to. It's useful to add some information about inputs and outputs, but that may be too much detail for now. However, it is recommended to think about the measures of effectiveness or the key performance indicator for each process, as these are critical measures of the process and its performance. For the next steps in the PDCA cycle, we can go back and take a look at the instructions in the blue tab, and then ultimately ending in the red tab. The basic instructions for the red tab give us the opportunity to describe some of the steps the process follows. Again, it's important to stick to the top level and not too much detail. The name of the process comes from the blue tab. The date would be today's date that you're actually taking the time to list out the steps of the process. There should be a new tab for each major process. It's convenient to move or copy the template and simply rename the template and reorganize each individual template for every new process listed. The task steps listing is the most important information, and it's also important to get the information out in small bite-sized pieces and not necessarily in the sequence you take to do the process. Though it's helpful if we put them in their sequence, later on we'll take a look at their sequence in more detail. This is where the true power of mapping comes into play. Listing out the task steps allows us to create the maps, then we can help visualize the sequence they should be in. You can see in the red tab there are additional columns that will help guide us through the mapping process. Some of the key columns include choices of whether or not a task is truly an event, a gateway, is truly a task, might be a sub-process, or simply data with some notation. Each one of these container types in the final business process modeling value stream map is crucial in the way the map flows. By adding some information here, it will help us in the future of the map build, but these choices are not permanent and can be reviewed as the map is built. This concludes the video training on setting up the PDCA spreadsheet to begin the business process value stream map model. The next steps are very simple. Follow the gold, blue, and red maps, check in on each workbook, fill in the basic information, and start thinking in terms of process. Thank you for your time. On to the next step.